Jof, thanks for coming on the podcast. We always start off with a brief introduction of yourself and the business that you're in, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. Okay. So I'm Jof Walters. I have had a long career in financial services, 25 years in financial services. And during that time, I built and sold 3 companies. Um, I now have a company called Greater Things, which invests in very early stage startup founders, tech startup founders specifically, to get them over the hump of taking an idea and making it real. So we build minimum viable products for them. And we've invested in about 53 startups in the pilot in the West Midlands region. They're all out there live and trading now. So that's my day job.
Good stuff. And could you take us a bit before starting the first business that you did and explain a little bit of what you were doing there, and then maybe go into like the reason for starting your own business?
Sure, no problem at all. So I came up through innovation in banking. So I was the head of innovation for a bank. I was new product development for a bank. And that means that you get to being very entrepreneurial. Um, and I think I was at Barclays when my boss, who was then the managing director, I think, of the business bank, said to me, I can see you being really successful, Walters, just not here. And that was a real good indication that perhaps I should go cut my teeth in the real world. So the first startup I founded was a while ago. Um, and it was genuinely to go and try out being my own boss and doing my own thing. That was actually, I say I founded it. I bought it out of administration and turned it around and sold it to some rather silly Americans. But um, it was a way of proving that I wasn't just a good entrepreneur. I could be an entrepreneur as well. And genuinely through my career, I've done that sort of Hollywood thing of doing the big blockbuster movie, so that I can then go do the independent movie. So I've sort of then flip-flopped between senior banking roles that pay very well and startups that tend not to pay so well, but allow you to kind of explore the things you want to do, right?
Cool. So what at what point do you leave the banks and then go all in on the first business? What time zone are we looking at?
The first one was, I think that was, I just got married. No, I don't. Yeah, it was about 2006 that I did the
Right.
first one. And sold that in, it was like 18 months to turn that around. That was really quick. And then I built another one in 2010, which I sold in 2015. That's a corporate finance business. And I exited one last year. That's Million Labs, where I now sit on the
Right.
board. Um, yeah, so my I'm like a poker player. I get away from the table when I've got more chips than I started with. That's all. So I've never been one to I know the bit I'm good at is the beginning bit. Um, and so genuinely, Simon, who we still use Million Labs for all of the development of our MVPs, and Simon, who runs that, is a great guy at taking that on its scaling journey. And part and parcel of being a good founder is knowing what you are good at and what you're not so good at. So that's been a big part of my story is getting out when I've given as good as I can get, and then giving it to somebody that can take it on the next stage.
What are what are some of those things that you do at the start then to make it so I guess you've experienced quite quick growth, and if that's where your expertise is at, what are some of the first things that you do or did when you first went into these companies?
I think I think that the thing that we've always done is we've always known who the customer was. So we always had a customer before we started. Um, that was key, and it is key even now. All of the startups that we invest in, that's the thing that we use AI to judge our startups, to underwrite our startups. And if you look at the thing it's trained itself to look for, it's evidence that the founder knows who their customer is. That's the thing that it weights most heavily in its decision making. And it's true of the real world. basing its learning on real world success. So, that's been part and parcel of all of the startups. And the other thing was we always went, even before I knew what the lean startup was, or had become aware of Eric and Steve Blank and the others. We genuinely did things in bite-sized chunks. So we would go and, with Million Labs, me and Simon built the first applications ourselves to figure out what the process was, to figure out how it worked. And then we would go through a journey of industrializing and automating processes. That's how you get from doing things that don't scale to doing things that do scale. But it also means we spent very little money in all my businesses as we've gone on that journey, and we never raised gabajillions of pounds and then tried to deliver on the promise of that raise. We only ever used the money that we needed to get to the next step in the journey. And I think that's what a lot of people do wrong. They overcook because they raise too quickly. They don't know their customer properly. They build things they never needed to build, all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you say about the knowing your customer, because that's the first thing that we've always done with needing to outbound campaigns. And it's not, and I guess you have the same thoughts on it as me, is it's not creating it yourself, it's going and asking them why they use you. So people seem to create an ICP from sitting in a all-day meeting with their execs and go through all the features and, oh, this person will love this feature. But then when you speak to the customers, the reason that they actually use you is completely different to what you think.
You'd say it all the time. I mean, my favorite example, as I say, I come from banking. I built a challenger bank, and one of the things that we would hear was of the challenger banks coming into the process saying that there's a big lending gap in the north, right? Which there is, or was. And they got this from a report, it was a Gartner report or something that had been released. They'd all read the same report. And they'd all based their business case on this report, but none of them had ever gone up to the north to figure out what. Right?
Yeah.
So there's all these London bankers in the Bank of England trying to apply this business case where they'd never actually gone and spoken to the customers that they were going to serve. And so they would immediately build the wrong things. They all did. They went in the wrong direction. Whenever a founder comes to you and you say, what's the basis of why are you building this? And they say, well, I've done a lot of desk-based research. You kind of have to pull the handbrake up. I always say to founders, take me to dinner and introduce me to your first 3 customers. And if you can't do that, don't start.
Yeah. Yeah. Bankers in London probably don't know where the north is. That's why.
They get a nosebleed when they go above Watford. Yeah, it's true.
Watford, I'd usually say Sheffield. So Watford's a good place. Do you want to bring us more up to date then, in terms of what Greater Things is and what they're doing in a bit more detail?
Sure, no problem. So the big problem in venture capital, that's not a big volume. I mean, if you think about a world where we used to have really traditional old businesses, tube benders, truck companies, shops, those businesses aren't doing as well as they used to, for all sorts of reasons. And the main reason is technology. And so for most of us, we looked towards digital business as the logical replacement for traditional business. The challenge is that bank lending isn't very good at servicing digital businesses because they don't offer much by way of security. You can't go and repossess somebody's application. It doesn't, and then say it doesn't work the same as a van or a printing press. And so the industry's kind of answer for that for the past 20 years has been always, okay, venture capital will plug the gap. But it's sort of a fundamental misunderstanding of venture capital. It doesn't do that. It's for very, very high growth businesses and infrastructure sort of investments and those kind of things. And so what we've been working on with Greater Things was, how do we, in this modern world of digital businesses, create the small business loan, the thing that's going to get those companies started? And the answer is, you kind of have to fix equity. You have to figure out how you price equity better. for smaller businesses. You manage risk that is a lot less easy to understand. Um, and you have all of the standard processes that you would have in banking, where somebody can go and fill out an application form and get your bit of money, rather than venture capital, where they have to go and sit in front of two twits that went to Eton 65 times before they get their
Yeah.
impulse. No offense to some of my colleagues in the industry. And so that's what Greater Things is an attempt to do. We did two things. Million Labs, which is the business we referred to earlier on, spent the past nearly 10 years actually figuring out how to build technology very, very cheaply, which is one part of the problem. And Greater Things came along to make the act of investing cheap and scalable. And that's what it does. So the pilot for that, which has been the West Midlands region, kindly supported by the government in the region. God bless Andy Street, the former mayor. Current mayor's lovely too. He just didn't write us any checks. That's allowed us to invest in quite a lot of founders, in more than 50 founders now. And because we act like a bank, loads of unforeseen things have happened. We've got where we are, I think, the most inclusive investor in the UK. We don't discriminate in any way against anybody, but we don't positively discriminate either. But because credit cards aren't racist, right? And neither are our processes, because they're like a bank's processes. But it turns out that people that do pitch meetings are biased, and they are, the process is knocking people out. So we've ended up being very inclusive. We've ended up being able to prove that we create jobs far cheaper than any other mechanism, which is great. So the British Business Bank, it costs them £128,000 to create a job. That is one nurse, one teacher, a policeman, and a fireman. If you want to put that in that kind of maths. And it costs us about £8,000, £7,000 or £8,000 to create a job. So all of these things have been a way of showing the ecosystem that's looking at kind of how do we keep driving the UK forward. Well, if you make an efficient model for writing checks, you can create growth again, in regions like the West Mids, and we're going to Leeds and Glasgow and Essex and the Southwest next. So yeah, that's what we do.
Very good. What do you mentioned that you've got AI that looks at the business to see if it's like a good fit, and if it's something that you want to work with. So you've got the ICP side of it. Knowing your ICP is an important part. What's some other important characteristics that you look for?
Easy for you to say. We're really open. We have a very open front door. We love. We're obviously only working with technology businesses. We don't. We can't really help somebody that wants to change, I don't know, build a massive data center. It's not us. We got a guy applied to us that wanted to build a water park in Belize. Can't help. When we're looking at businesses, we talked about, we really wanted to know our customers. We want our founders to know their customers, know them really, really well. That's at the heart of it. And the other thing is, I mean, the really interesting thing is they're very hard to identify until you get their product live. Most investors will tell you tenacity and grit is a big thing, right, in the founder themselves. We get a lot of people that are, I would describe as build it and they will come kind of founders. They think that once their business is live, customers will just come and buy the product back. I don't think that's true for anybody. It's not true for Apple. It's not true for, it's not going to be true for a startup founder. So we also look for realists, people that have that ability to say, well, I know it's going to be a 2-year journey of testing and learning. And, we think we want those customers over there, but what we're going to figure out after the first 6 months is actually we wanted those ones there. And being capable of letting your ego go and being led by your customers to where the money is a huge part of success. So it's a mixture between, before they come into the process, they've done the work, but once they've gone into the process, they're capable of keep going and learning and building upon that initial understanding.
Yeah, action takers rather than people that just talk.
Yeah. Oh, and believe me, in any startup ecosystem, there is quite a lot of hot air.
Yeah. What are some it might be good for us to go through like a success story of a business that you've invested in and sort of like how they uh got it off the ground and then made it successful. Have you got any examples of them?
Yeah, I'll tell you a good one actually. There's a lovely guy called Ali Kazmi, and I often refer back to Ali because his story is really sort of indicative of what happens, right? Ali came to us to build an angel network. He was going to build an angel network called Ethical Equity, which still exists, still a business. And that his thesis was there are people out there that want to invest in B corporations, ethical businesses, impact businesses, that can't necessarily find them. And there are startup founders that want to find good ethical investors, thus the brand name, and they can't find each other. So we're going to build a platform and an institution that creates events and things that will bring those two groups together. And what he learned the second that he launched was that actually there's a huge pool of angel investors out there that just don't know how the fuck to do what they want to do. So immediately, like after sort of a year of trying to get these angel investors into the platform to invest and realizing that they really had nobody telling them how to do their job, he built a secondary product called Angel Investor. What's it called? AI Simulator, Angel Investment Simulator, which of course everybody thinks is artificial intelligence simulator. But anyway, he built that product, and that became a fantastic education platform, which is now used by big companies on both. I mean, we use it, but it's used by big companies on both sides of the ocean, and is growing like wheat. And what that does is, first of all, it taught angel investors how to do their job, and then it started teaching founders what angel investors wanted because it knew that, right?
Yeah.
So it now connects those two groups together far, far more fundamentally than they ever could previously. Now, that journey we invested in 2001, and I would say Ali is just enjoying the first kind of blush of success from that business. So it's been a long iterating. He's had to, throw himself in a deep, deep pond of his customers, listen to them, realize that they were selling the wrong sandwich, have the guts to go, we're going to take another run at building the right thing, and then go out and find a way of distributing that, getting it into enough people's hands. And so, it's phenomenal. Of course, for me, what's really, really cool about Ali is we wrote a tiny check. And in doing so, we created this business that in itself is creating tons and tons of other startups, right?
Yeah.
And funding tons and tons of other startups. So it's like this mad multiplying effect of, one little first step has helped us to help someone create, an enormous amount of good. The other reason I like Ali is he has never lost his integrity. He has always, always had that focus on, positive outcomes from investment. And I don't think that's necessarily true of everybody in the startup ecosystem. So yeah, I will continue to back him until the day I die. I think he's great.
Well, seems like another example of listening to what your customers are telling you
Oh yeah.
and
And I could give
changing.
you, for him, I could give you 10 people that never did,
Yeah.
that got into it for all the wrong reasons and never listened to a single customer, never met a customer because they just didn't have the right thing to start with.
Yeah.
Sad.
What do you see, obviously especially over the past year, obviously the introduction of AI, does that take effect on any of these companies that come with that are trying to build software, whereas now it's becoming easier and easier to do it using a different software, so you can build apps inside of apps.
Yeah,
apps using apps.
If you look at Labs, Labs is a codeless development capability, and it is the largest one in possibly Europe now, certainly the UK by a country mile. And we we genuinely had this learning curve of, we started out, I mean, I love it. I've literally seen this today. Somebody saying, oh, we're a codeless development agency and we apply agile. Well, then you're not a codeless development agency because with all those agile's gone in the bin, so it's still a very nascent thing. People don't really understand they don't understand it has a different development methodology, a different testing methodology. But that's one side. That's just the building the shit thing, right? I mean, the effect on startups has been interesting. It's really easy to build them, so therefore it's really easy to throw them in the bin. So that kind of undermines that tenacity point we made. If it cost you £250,000 to build a bit of tech, you will try everything within your living power to make it stick.
Yep.
Whereas if you built it in 10 minutes off the side of your desk, you go, did anybody want it? No, they didn't. Well, fuck it. We'll throw it away, right? So that's been a thing. But AI has had a fascinating impact. It's allowed us to create far more scalable consultancy-based businesses. That's the biggest impact. People that used to go and sell themselves are now capable of selling themselves multiple times over.
Yeah.
And it's just enabling a whole bunch of taking unstructured data and turning it into structure, and taking very small inputs and turning it into creation, right? That's the heart of Gadzooks proposition. But there are downsides. Of course, there are downsides. And one of them, to the point of your podcast, is that it is also distancing people from their customers. Just like websites distance people from their customers, sticking people behind a chatbot so you don't deal with their complaints means that you don't learn why your customers are complaining. So there is a negative thing to automating out human relationships. You have to kind of still, that's part scalability. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but you still have to figure out how to put the human back in. And the other thing, of course, is that you can stick an AI teacher in front of somebody and they will pay 10 quid a year for it. You stick a human teacher in front of a person, and they will pay £10 for 10 minutes, and it's giving them the same information. And so figuring out when a human being is providing high value and using that, and figuring out when to use a robot, which people will always put low value on, is part of this journey we're all on. I love our little robot underwriter because I don't have to hire a bunch of 90 grand stuff shirts. Yeah, we've literally saved, I don't know, what, 270 grand this year from not having those people in the business.
Right.
And the cost to me for what would have been their salaries is now probably about 15 quid a month. It's incredible. That's incredible in terms of the cost saving. I do feel sorry for those boys. They're going to have to find other jobs.
Yeah, and it's like, it's similar to what we've experienced in the outbound stuff, is that the barrier to entry is so low now that it is hard to cut through the noise, but you've just got to adapt, like hopefully I'm doing with the outreach and pivot in. And the ones that adapt are always the ones that come out on top in the end.
Yeah. I do think, to a point you made pre-podcast, so that's a bit of the magic. Cats and kittens. There was a prior to the podcast bit that you'll never get to see. But I think you said before we started, you made reference to the things which are hot on everybody's kind of voice right now: the differentiation, the authenticity, which is important, providing value through this kind of content.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting to see people that are trying to be authentic. That thing of like false authenticity. I think that's a really interesting thing. It's like, how do I be authentic and differentiate myself? Well, you need a differentiated point of view. You probably need to have gone and researched it and know what you're talking about. You need the scars on your back to be able to talk about it. And to be authentic, you just need to be yourself, right? And if yourself isn't good enough, you probably need to go and have some counseling. Go and spend some time in the wilderness. But I think that's a really interesting test of like quality of content. I have a dear friend of mine who's been a leader in the financial services industry for years, because he has put his entire life into understanding the very, very leading edge of financial services. And when he talks, it's riveting, because he's not only got the now, but he's got all that experience that backs up why have we got to where we've got to.
Yeah.
And so, he is a phenomenal content provider on that basis. He's also got so much self-confidence now that he will give lectures whilst painting miniatures in his study, because which is about as authentic as you can be. He loves
Is-
Dungeons and Dragons.
I was speaking to I found a business owner yesterday on Monday, and I was saying something, like you need to be putting content out there. Like they'd own a business for 15 years, and they think that everybody knows what they know. It's like, no, you've run a business for 15 years. Not many people do that. Like, you have things to share. You have things that people need to know about, and you just need to do it.
Yeah, the validity of their opinion, and it's the little bits and bops, that are absolutely fascinating. You do have to, and I think it's one of those things that people miss, is that you have to say the same thing over and over again, and sometimes
Yeah.
you have to think about how you repackage that information, because the internet forgets really quickly, and sometimes you feel like, well, people are going to get fed up of hearing me say this, not realizing that none of the people who
Nobody
watched you
knows.
say it this time heard it last time and the time before.
Yeah.
So we have that thing of like a carousel of Joff's going to say this thing this fortnight. And it comes round again. And I kind of have to not look at what I said before. I have to try it again. That's been a bit of an interesting learning for me.
Yeah.
Am I saying this again? Yeah, saying this again.
There's a
I can tell you next week we will be back to pitching is effectively racist, sexist, and homophobic. Let's do it. Start. We've done that before. We're doing it again.
There's a good story from Ford I can't remember when it was, but in the offices, and Henry Ford, they've got their next marketing campaign in the window of one of their offices, and Henry Ford says to his marketing manager, like, "How are we going to change this campaign? I'm absolutely sick of seeing it." And the marketing person says, "We've not even launched it yet."
Yeah, that resonates.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to, I'm an advisor on a startup over in Australia. I was talking to them at the crack of dawn, and they've been in build phase. It's a deep tech. They've been in build now for 3 or 4 years, and they look like people that are climbing to the top of Mount Everest, because they've been in an echo chamber for 4 years. They're not even in the market. That's the job of research and development. That's really, it's really hard. And yeah, and it's just an echo chamber for a really long time, and they're sick to death of each other. Sick to death of each other. They've got to get to the end of the journey now. So it's like the last push. I totally get it. Being a founder is saying the same thing over and again. I advise a bank. Actually, I finished last year because we sold out the guy I was advising. But he said to me how frustrated he was, because when he started, he felt like he could do whatever he wanted to do. It was that era of creation,
Yeah.
testing new things every day. But when the business got big, he said, I can't make any decisions anymore. Any strategy that we follow is a multi-year strategy. So I just sit here watching things happening and dealing with people management. And that's part of the growth of the business. That's how it happens. Your role changes. Is what it is.
Yeah. We are getting pushed for time, so I want to finish on what's next. What's next for you? Greater things, and the next however long you want to go to.
Well, we can be. This is always the good, honest bit where everybody gets. So first of all, you're seeing me in a crap hoodie, and this is the what version of me that people don't tend to see in the real world. But yeah, we're in the crucible at the moment of moving from effectively a pilot phase into scaling. So we're trying to, by the end of this year, move from a single region to 5 regions, and because we are state sponsored in our programs, that's a long, arduous process of networking and contracting and raising money. I'm in that funny position of being if you're an investor, you're actually always seeking investment. You're just an intermediary. And so I worn out shoe leather 100 times over going and raising money over the past few years, and I shall continue to do so for the rest of my existence, I think. So that's what we're at the moment. It is not easy. There are times when I've said to my wife, I really do miss having a massive office in London and a huge salary and not having to worry about things. But you know, you only do this if you genuinely think that you are sticking it to the man and making the world a better place. And if you don't think that, why the fuck are you a startup founder?
Yeah. Yeah, it's no, it's and I guess the drive does the drive come from seeing the success stories then of people that probably would not get the funding of the what used to be, or how venture capital used to be, or is mostly.
There isn't will be for a long time to go. Well, it's
I
a
would say it
different,
is.
it's a different mechanism. It does
Yeah.
its job, and we do ours. Um, but what do I think? I think yes, I get lots of Christmas presents, and free drinks, and people send me nice messages, things like that. But I don't really have that bigger ego. I think I think the reason that I do this is because I think it needs to be done, and I don't think anybody else is doing it right. And that arrogance is built into every startup founder. Like I'm the only person that knows this, and everybody,
Yeah.
you know, is what it is. And I think it's a mental illness. I think you can't if I try to stop doing this one before I've completely proven it doesn't work or proved it does work. Um, you know, I would always have an itch at the back of my brain that says you should have done that. And that's
Yeah.
been the case with, I had a startup that didn't work out in 2018. It pivoted to being Million Labs. We were going to build a corporate finance due diligence engine effectively. And I'd wanted to do that for a decade. I always said that was my big idea. And it turned out to be crap. But the second that I found that out, the itch went away and I never had to worry about it ever again. So that I think is part of this yeah, as I say, I think it's a mental illness. That's founder syndrome.
Well, look, Joff, I really enjoy the honest conversation. Like you said, can't beat authenticity, and this has been one of the honest chats that I've had. So it's been really good. If people want to see what you're doing and are possibly interested in speaking with you, where can they find you?
I've got a really unique name, which is there on my screen, but I don't know where it'll be on anybody else's.
Yeah.
So you can find me by who I am. Find me on LinkedIn, and I genuinely will try to talk to anybody that reaches out. Million Labs, if you want development, go look at Million Labs. If you are looking for investment and you're in one of the regions we're in, you can find it's greater-things.co.uk. We don't really worry too much about SEO. So you will have to find it through me. Yeah, happy to chat with anybody.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks, Joff.